what's everybody? How are you doing today? Welcome to Dharma Time. I am your host, the Dharma Guy, and let me go ahead and fix this real quick. What am I doing here? Oh my god. Anyways, I am the Dharma Guy. This is Dharma Time. I'm your host, and I'm also here with. Let me go ahead and pop him up here while he's drinking. Oh, I just missed him while he was drinking. Oh wow. That is the Dope Doctor. What's up, man?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and it seems that you are no longer cooped up in your house.
No. I came to the studio, Trinity. Where you at?
I am cooped up in my house.
I'm at work,
I am
man. I'm
still
at
at my
work.
daughter's room. Um,
Yeah. Why don't you fix our check? How come our check is
yeah, I think she
face
took it
downward?
down. I don't know where it's at. I think she took it down when she cleaned her
I
room
see it.
before.
I see it behind you, but it's looking down.
Okay.
Beautiful Subaru.
Um, and yes, while we're speaking about that kind of stuff, by now everybody hopefully knows that what we do when we're not doing this is the Now Matters More Foundation. We help individuals struggling with the disease of addiction. So if you or anybody you know is looking for help with the disease of addiction, you can call 833 Now Matters. That's 833 Now Matters. Or you can go to nowmattersmore.org and you can kind of see who we are, what we do. You can also fill out an application for help. And as of today, for those of you looking for ways of giving back, additional ways of giving back, we've always had Smile.Amazon, but Smile.Amazon was kind of a problem for some people because you could not use the app to order. You had to go through the actual website. As of today, you can do it through the app, which is pretty cool. So if you just go to your app, click on settings, and go down to Amazon Smile, and then just turn it on and make sure you have Now Matters More selected. And what are you doing? I'm hearing all sorts of stuff.
What?
Yeah, I'm hearing all sorts. Do you have like a mouse or something there? And I'm hearing an echo now. What are you doing? Oh, he's changing. He didn't like. Oh, see, Simon, what you just did.
Yeah.
Simon, you made him. You made him switch headphones because you said you were sound like you're in a
Right.
closet.
Yeah, I don't like that. What about now, Simon? Do I still sound like I'm in the closet? See, that's the problem with this new setup.
Yeah. Well,
Do I still sound like I'm in a closet, Simon?
to me, you sound better.
Do I?
But yes. Anyways,
But I
uh,
don't care about what you think. I want to know what Simon thinks.
well,
What does
Simon.
Simon say?
Well, there's a delay here, so you're gonna have to wait for a minute.
Okay.
But anyways, so
Oh, wait. I'm waiting. I'm waiting on the delay.
for those of you who want to give back using Amazon Smile, it's awesome now that you can use your app. So if you haven't already done so, please use us for your charity for Smile.Amazon. All right, so we today's show once again for those of you who were in the pre-show here. I'm kind of looking forward to not talking about COVID or riots today. Last week we had a show planned. We were going to do common myths and misconceptions, but all hell broke loose around here, and riots and fires and all sorts of craziness happened that we kind of just we would be remiss if we didn't cover. So today is the myth show. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started, man. I have a whole list of myths here that myths and misconceptions that I personally have heard myself,
Yeah.
or I have looked up and seen kind of what the masses have talked about. And by all means, if you have any that you want to chime in, go for it. And for those of you who are listening to us live, obviously, feel free to write in the comment section and we'll address your myth or misconception that you've heard or maybe you have.
Right.
But anyways, so one of the ones that I guess the easiest ones to kind of get started with
Hmm.
are the ones that have to do with the philosophy itself, and that would be like one of the biggest myths that I hear a lot when it comes to just the structure of it. Like the nuts and bolts of the philosophy is number one. People just assume that the Buddha is a god of some sort, like he's the creator for us, like he's our version of God, and that's just not true. Like the Buddha is his real name was Siddhartha Gautama, and he was essentially just a guy who reached what he would call enlightenment, and then turned into some sort of a teacher basically and taught other people. I mean, I'm very much trivializing it, but I'm trying to break it down as simply as I can.
Yeah.
But you could think of him as just a really cool teacher who is just imparting wisdom upon you. He's no more of a god than your high school English teacher. So now
Hey,
does
my high school English teacher. No, never mind.
yeah, whatever. Show me on the doll where he hurt you. But no, so the
Oh, she's probably watching Mrs. Whitfield.
so that's a misconception people have is they think that Buddha is our god or something, and that's just not the case. He's just a teacher essentially. Which leads me to the other one that I get quite frequently is for some reason people seem to think that little fat guy is Buddha, and it's just not the Buddha when people think of the Buddha.
Buddha.
It's actually the skinny. He's actually right here. That one, the skinnier version, if you will. That is more along the lines of what Siddhartha looked like. The
The
little,
skinny
well,
version.
the little fat belly guy. That's just everybody thinks it's Buddha, like the Buddha belly and
Where'd
stuff
that
like
come
that.
from? Where'd that come?
He is, one of the like the quote unquote mystical beings from a different version of Buddhism, but he's not, the Buddha. The Buddha technically is actually just a title, right? Like we all have an inner Buddha. So Buddha just means that you've reached the level of enlightenment to where you no
Huh.
longer suffer things of that nature.
I have an inner fat guy too, though, Trinity.
We all do. But so I mean, those are some of the really easy myths that I hear all the time. The other one, well, I mean, let me erase some of these as I'm going through them, so if I don't go over them twice here. And so the other one I hear a lot, and this isn't necessarily a myth. I guess it just depends on your perspective, right? People think it's a religion. It's been my experience; those who actually practice it call it more of a path or a philosophy.
Mm.
Those who don't practice it tend to refer to it as a religion. Full disclosure depends on what your definition of religion is. Will depend on whether Buddhism is a religion or not. If that makes any sense. So for me personally, the way I define religion, Buddhism does not constitute a religion. And in addition to that, people oftentimes think that Buddhism cannot be incorporated into your lifestyle if you subscribe to any other major religion. And it's been my experience that that's just not true. There's nothing in Buddhism that inherently disagrees with anything from any of the major religions, mainly because it doesn't discuss creation or afterlife, things of that nature. It's more or less just trying to help you find an end to suffering, and that doesn't typically contradict any of the major teachings from major religions or philosophies, things of that nature, or traditions, if you will.
Because every religion suffers.
Yeah, well, people suffer. I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of where it all breaks down to.
Only for taxation purposes.
Exactly, for taxation purposes, for sure. And then, let me see. I already covered. Oh, so let's start out with one of the less controversial ones, or one of the easiest ones. Well, I say less controversial. It's actually a kind of a big controversy within Buddhism groups, apparently. But a lot of people think that you have to be a vegan to be a Buddhist, because
Vegan.
one of the precepts is thou shalt not kill. Like you won't take the life of a sentient being. Sentient being meaning just something that thinks, has a brain, whatever, lives. And that's kind of true, but kind of not true. Once again, it kind of depends on how you interpret things. But essentially, as a Buddhist, you're the only thing that would prohibit you from eating meat, for instance, if it was killed specifically for you, right? Like I'm getting into the nuts and bolts here, but
Yeah.
like if I go to Publix and I go in there and I want to buy chicken, well, that particular package of chicken was not killed or slaughtered for me specifically. It was already done. I'm just going to pick it up because in old times, a lot of the Buddhist monks, including Sid himself, would rely on donations of surrounding villages and people to eat, and so essentially whatever they gave you to eat, that's what you ate. And so if it just so happened to be meat, you weren't going to turn it down. You would say thank you and eat it.
That sounds like a technicality.
Sure, whatever you want it to be. Like,
I like that you call him Sid. I like that he has a nickname. I like that. That's what
yeah,
his name.
I
What's up,
can't
Sid?
I can't claim that one as my own, but it's easier to say than Siddhartha Gautama every time. But no, and to me, I think that speaks to the bigger picture, right? One of the other myths that I hear all the time that I've spent so much time, like, I've really spent an absurd amount of time trying to illustrate this to different groups of people, talking to them over the years.
Right.
And understandably so, because if you come from like a traditional Western mindset where you think of religion and that's kind of the focal point you're coming from, it's hard to wrap your head around. But this idea that there's this like doctrine, and there's this one kind of like path, if you will, of Buddhism, and like everybody follows in line with that, right? And that's just that's not the path, right? It's in that sense it's more of a philosophy, right? Because my path in Buddhism is going to be different than your path. You and I both can be Buddhists, but we can go about things differently. Like you can choose to be a vegan or a vegetarian because for you personally, that's how you interpret the teachings, if you will. To whereas mine, I can have it and have no problem with it. And neither one of us are going against the Buddhist philosophy here. It's a very it's not based on faith. It's more or less based on experience. So the Buddha himself basically said, "Look, I'm giving you a bunch of things that I know to be true to reach enlightenment. And if you try them and they help you with your suffering, then do them. If they don't help you with your suffering, then don't do them." That's essentially kind of how it goes. And so in that sense, it's very complicated, or not complicated. It's very hard for somebody who is looking at it from the definition of religion's perspective. It's hard to understand that, right? Because if you're looking at like Christianity, for instance, you have like the Ten Commandments, and that's just what everybody has to follow, and there is no wiggle room for a lot of people. And whereas Buddhism is not really like that. Well, so I said something funny. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you just said it kind of, I don't know, kind of different. I mean,
Go ahead.
just the way you said it, oh, it's kind of like that, almost like kind of negative,
What do you mean?
but there's people that actually, they believe in that. And I don't know if thou shalt not kill is very argumentative.
Well,
I don't think you
negative
can
is your
argue that.
interpretation there, homie.
That's what I'm going by. I'm going by my interpretation. That's why I'm laughing. I'm
Sure.
laughing because the
What
way
was negative?
you said it in a certain tone.
And what was
Did
you
it
sound like my
very
wife now?
throw it out. Well, maybe she's right.
What was negative? What did you interpret as negative?
The way you said it. The way you said it. Say it
I said
again.
what?
Say it again.
I don't even know what I said anymore. What did I
The
say?
12 commandments. Just when you said it's not like the 12 commandments where it's like this. You made it sound like
Well,
real rigid,
it's not regimented. It's not a doctrine. It's not a list of do's and don'ts. That's not quite how it operates. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, if that's what strikes your fancy, go for it. I'm just trying to, because there's a myth. Like you can't compare the two. People approach Buddhism with the same mindset of a religion, and
I agree with you. Can't compare the two, and that's what I would probably do, is not compare them. I would just simply say one is more of a philosophy and one is a religion.
sure. But as far as the myths go, that's why the myth is in existence, because people are comparing and people are coming at it thinking religion typically has a lot of do's and don'ts, a lot of rules of what you can and can't do, or ways that you have to do things, and this particular philosophy doesn't necessarily have that same kind of rigidity. There's a lot more. It's a philosophy, so it's how you apply it is going to be different for each person.
So why is it considered a religion in some areas or by some people?
Well, first and foremost, if we're looking at just down to basics, I think it's because people just like to label things. It makes them feel more comfortable.
But what people? When you say people, what people? Because it's listed as a
People who call it
religion,
religion.
but it's listed as a religion when you study it. It's
So the
listed as a
people who
religion.
listed it, it
Yeah.
feels better for them to label it a
So
religion.
why do scholars call it a religion? That's what I'm asking.
Because I think it makes them feel good to label things. Like people feel more comfortable when you can label something as something and move on.
Yeah, but you can label it a philosophy. They don't call Freudian a religion.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't label it, so you'd have to ask them. I mean, to me, calling it religion doesn't make sense.
Okay,
Except
I got a myth. Are all Buddhists as sarcastic as you?
no, no, that's
Is
a
that a
special.
Buddhist? Is that a Buddhist thing
That's a
to be sarcastic about everybody
It's not
else's thought
sarcastic. It's
process?
a legitimate answer. I don't know. I didn't label it, so I can't
Let
presume
me
to
ask
tell you
Simon.
what they were thinking.
I'm going to ask Simon now because Simon is very well versed in this. Simon, why do they call it a religion, Simon?
Well, my thing with religion is first and foremost, once again, it makes people feel good to label things. Secondly, could there be religious components to it? Sure, and it all depends on your definition of religion. I mean, there is no one definition of religion that everybody agrees on, all across the world. Everybody's definition is slightly different. So even the word religion, it's kind of like trying to define the word love. Like you just can't.
What does Webster say?
I don't know. I haven't looked it up.
I gotta ask Webster.
But anyways, for me personally, it doesn't fit the definition of religion because there is no doctrine, there is no afterlife, there is no heaven or hell, there is no creator. There's none of that. It's all basically
Now that you might be stepping on something. All right, so the creator part. I mean, I think that's why I don't think of Buddhism as a religion because of that.
right.
Because there's no creator in afterwards. You know what I mean? Like there's no before and after.
Yeah, it doesn't even
It's
address it.
it's
Like it doesn't
it
say there is
right,
none. It
right.
just says that doesn't help you not suffer. So I'm not
It,
even going to talk about it.
right, and I believe it to be a philosophy because it's a matter of being. It's a way of behaving while you're here, while you're doing what you're
Right.
doing. And that's why I believe it to be a philosophy.
Simon said there are followers who identify with as a guidance for life. Do we call people Freudian followers?
Probably. There's
Maybe.
probably some Freudian followers.
Yeah. But so to me, it's just it's a myth, though. To me,
Yeah,
that it's a religion.
yeah.
A lot of people now. Am I going to deny the fact that it is listed as a religion? No. I mean, I can't deny fact, but the fact that it is labeled as a religion, I can question the validity of that labeling.
I'll go back to that taxation thing that he said. I mean, for
Yeah.
tax purposes,
Yeah.
I think they fall under the Religious Freedom Act,
Sure.
and I believe they have taxation preferences
Right.
and lack of taxation.
But so that to me is just one of the myths or misconceptions is people think that I'm like I found this new religion, and I'm like, no. Like, in other words, when I tell people I'm an atheist that practices Buddhism, the look of confusion on their face is usually like, what? Like, they can't comprehend how you're an atheist and also a Buddhist,
Right,
because
right,
to them, it's a religion, and Buddha's a god, and it's like, well, no, he's actually not. Like,
right, right.
it's almost like saying as an atheist you can't go to school, and have a professor. Like, no, you can, like, because he's not actually a god. But like I said, that's a misconception. Like people who haven't spent any real time looking into the philosophy aren't going to know those things.
Yeah.
Because your initial judgment, because most of the time when they, other than the Hollywood elites, if you will, most of the time they show Buddhism, it's typically some dude in a robe, meditating all day in a monastery. So I can understand how to the layman the vibe of religion kind of comes through, but that's only one small segment of who practices this.
Yeah, because it looks like it has a lot of rules.
Yeah, it
It
does.
looks exactly opposite of what you said. You said it has no rules, and it actually looks like a bunch of
Well,
rules.
no, it has some rules. I mean, there's certain precepts. There's certain things, but oftentimes it comes down to intent. You know what I mean? Like, it's much in the same way. Like, for instance, thou shalt not, kill. For instance, in the Ten Commandments, if you will. Well, we have a similar precept, meaning don't take life. However, if I take a life through ignorance or through negligence, things of that nature. Otherwise, if my intent was not to harm anybody, then I'm not going to create any negative karma for myself because that wasn't my intent. It was an accident, or it was a result of a series of events, none of which had the intent of hurting somebody. And even still, they have like people. Some Buddhists will choose to, if there's like a mosquito in their house, some of them will choose to usher it out the door as opposed to swatting it. Because in their mind, they don't want to kill a sentient being. In my mind, I'm going to kill it. Why? Because I'm going to try to protect the safety of myself and my family members. I don't want them to experience pain and things of that nature. You know,
Salmonella,
sure.
whatever, or meningitis, whatever the hell they
Now,
carry. I don't know what they carry.
now, if I were to kill the mosquito just because I'm bored and I want to kill it, then that's creating negative karma because my intent isn't to protect my family or to keep people from experiencing pain. My intent is just to take a life. And so,
Oh, I like.
that's yeah. He says the myth there is karma is only negative. Simon, you're absolutely right. You're jumping the gun a little bit because I had it on here, but since you brought it up, let's put it out there. The other myth that people think of when they think of karma, they usually think of karma as he said negative, as some sort of an immediate punishment or as a result of what you did, right? Like,
Yeah, like I say something negative to you, and then I go stub my toe.
yeah, and oh, see, karma. They'll say, oh, karma's a bitch.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's just not really kind of how karma works, right? We did an entire show on karma, probably like a year ago now. We call it karmic fruit, and essentially all karma really is just the results of your intent, right? In other words, no matter what my action is, it wasn't what my intent was going into it. Meaning, if I do something for somebody, but my intent is to manipulate that person, or my intent is to benefit from that situation. In other words, if it wasn't a true intent, then I'm going to create negative karma for myself. In other words, positive things give positive outcomes, negative things get negative outcomes, right? And so, and that it all revolves around intent. It's not actually what I do; it's what my intention was. And so in that sense, the idea of karma being a punishment for, what you did, it's not completely off base, but it's slightly misinterpreted in that sense. I
Right.
mean, don't get me wrong; it feels good to say, right? I mean, as a human, it feels great to have somebody call you a name and then walk into a wall. Like
Yes.
it's a great immediate feeling as a human. But as far
Yeah.
as the Buddhist precepts and the Buddhist philosophy is concerned, that's not quite how karma works. In a
Well,
sense, it's like whatever you're experiencing in your life and in your day to day activity right now, it's a result of the karma that you generated previously, right? So you're going through right now what you created earlier in your life or
well,
in your day.
but in a way, if you threw out negative vibes towards somebody and then you received a negative response,
Yeah,
why can't that be considered karma? It sounds like karma.
yeah. If that's what your
I mean,
your intent was, yeah.
that's what I'm saying. If somebody intended to harm you and then they go stub their toe,
Then we could argue that that is karmic fruit. Yes.
right? And
If
what they didn't understand is that I got a lot of ghosts that exist. A lot of my dead are all around me. So if you mess with me, they're gonna get you. I got positive juju, bro, and that's
well,
positive karma.
and
I
then
got a lot of
there is positive karma, right? And so
yeah,
like if you're out there, you're doing a lot of philanthropic work, you're trying to help out your fellow man,
right,
things of that nature, and something good happens to you,
yeah,
or you're experiencing a lack of suffering moving forward,
right,
then that would be a direct result of the karma that you put out there into
right.
the world, essentially,
That's how I feel. I got a lot of dead with me,
right?
and they stand with me like an army. I got a dead army behind me.
Well, and we don't have to cover all of the ones that I have listed here, but I think this one kind of leads
Okay.
into the next one that I think is kind of really important. And it's not a strictly Buddhist myth. It's a religion slash spiritual myth,
Mm.
and so this can apply to many other ones. But there's an implication out there that whenever you say to somebody, "I'm this," being I'm Buddhist, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm whatever, there's certain expectations that come along with that. So, for instance, like you said, if I'm being sarcastic, right? There's many people out there with, well, that's not very Buddhist of you.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, it is actually. Or like if a Christian says, some sarcasm or cusses somebody out or whatever, oh, that's not very Christian of you. It is.
Well, it's not.
But it is, right? Because even in Christianity, nobody's,
You're
nobody,
flawed.
no,
You're flawed.
exactly. We're all flawed human
A
beings.
sinner.
And so this idea, this weird concept that we have of judgment, where we judge somebody based upon the absolute highest ideal that exists for that particular label, and
Right.
compare everybody to that at their bad moment,
Right.
is ridiculous. It's a myth that if you're Buddhist, then you're this constant, passive Zen-like monk who's traveling the world
You're,
meditating all day. That's not Buddhist. I mean, it can be, but you don't have to fit in that little mold to consider yourself a Buddhist. All Buddhist means is you follow the philosophy trying to end suffering in your life. That's it.
that's it.
You're going to be unskillful many a times in your life, and you know what? You're still Buddhist, and you could still be a good Buddhist. You just had an unskillful moment. It's what you
Is there
do afterwards.
is there a job you can think of that would be so non-Buddhist? Going
Many,
with that exact myth that you're just talking about.
yeah,
So, is there any kind
many,
of occupation?
yeah. Anything in sex work, anything in the military, drug
So,
dealing. There's plenty of them.
so would that be like weird to see a Buddhist stripper
Would it be weird? Well, depend.
or a Buddhist prostitute? Would that be? Could you go to her and say you shouldn't be a Buddhist or that you're being a bad Buddhist? Is that what you're saying?
I no, no.
I didn't think that's what you're saying. That's what I'm.
I'm not. I'm saying that as a Buddhist, if you're looking for ways of achieving enlightenment, to where you have a lack of suffering in your life,
Right.
then you might want to choose a different career path that more closely aligns with those goals. But you can still be a Buddhist prostitute if you're wanting to, if that's the career choice that you're in, or if you feel obligated to be that. You can still approach it with the Buddhist philosophy, because it is an accepting type of thing. It's not, but once again, the fifth part of the Eightfold Path says that your job what's called right livelihood, whatever you do for a living should not contribute to the harm or suffering of yourself or anybody else. And one could argue that the act of prostitution does harm families, harms your own psyche. It can harm your sense of well-being. It can harm many other things. Doesn't necessarily have to. You know as well as I do. There's outliers in everything. I would argue, though, that the outliers that don't get harmed in some sort of way from prostitution are very small, if they exist at all.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't be Buddhist. It just means that you're being unskillful at the moment, or you're not, giving yourself the best leg up.
Hey,
I see Enrique just posted a book there.
is it? But what is that?
Enrique says, I do not subscribe to rules of any kind, religious or otherwise. I have free will and is rebellious. I do explore and take in suggestions because I have learned to rely on consequential thinking, aka wisdom, that is not one who have not ignored a good suggestion and paid the price and hopefully following by learning. Yeah, I mean, it's a good rule of thumb to go on. I mean,
I like.
I can't argue against that for sure.
He's a wise man.
He is.
What's with the little icon in it? What's the little picture?
What
Did you
picture?
see that? Did he create that? The Couch Club 2020? Did you see that?
I don't see that.
You don't see it? He's sitting on a couch. He's laying on a couch. It's called the Couch Club in
Oh, yeah, I don't
2020.
see it.
Oh man, that's too bad.
But anyways, so I do want to get rid of that myth and that judgment, right? And once again, it's not just Buddhism that has that. And I'm guilty of it myself, right? Like, I'm guilty of when I see somebody on TV, really harshly criticizing or hurting somebody or just completely
Right.
destroying another person, but then they're touting biblical phrases and things. I'm sorry, but I've been guilty in the past of saying, well, that's not very Christian of you, and it is a judgment and it is bad because it is Christian of them. It's because Christians are
Yeah.
flawed. They're human beings,
Right.
Just
Well,
because
they say it themselves. They call themselves all sinners.
yeah,
They say
I
it
mean,
themselves.
just because you subscribe to a particular philosophy or tradition or religion doesn't automatically imply that you're the best of that and you're perfect at all times. It doesn't erase your humanness, basically, is what I'm saying. And so I think that if anybody out there, including myself, is guilty of throwing that out every now and then, you might want to rethink that.
Right.
There's a more skillful response. And using the Buddhist philosophy, when it comes to right intent or even right speech, what is your intent in saying that to somebody? Is your intent to educate and to help, or is your intent to criticize and hurt? Right speech, is it truthful and useful? So kind of putting that down on somebody is something we need to rethink. And like I said, myself, I've done that in the past. I try not to anymore because I know it's a judgmental thing, so I don't really do it anymore. And that was something I had to work on. I haven't done it lately, but it was years ago. I kind of acknowledged that and had to work on it. But it
I
happens to
think what
me.
I think what you're saying is hypocrisy is human.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And I try to, because I hate it when it's done to me. People will all the time. If I, because of the Dharma Guy, if I do something, anything that's out of line with what they think the Dharma Guy should or shouldn't do, oftentimes that's a go-to, right? They'll say, "Hey, well, that's not very Dharma Guy-ish." Like, well, yeah, actually, it is because I'm
I
flawed.
like to joke with you like that. So that's not very Dharma
Uh,
time.
well, no, I mean yours is in a joking manner, but there's other people I've met
Yeah.
in my life that is very. It's not coming from a place of love; it's coming from a place of anger. But regardless, that is a myth, right? And I think that's a myth that's not just with this particular philosophy, but with many.
I agree with you, and that's always kind of bothered me because I used to be guilty of that. I was raised as a Catholic, so I used to be guilty of that when I kind of started doing things that weren't considered very Catholic. As a young man, when you're raised within a religion and you start doing things that are sinnerish, you go away from it, right?
Right.
That's a lot. That's pretty normal. And then you become very judgmental towards usually what you stepped away from.
Right.
It doesn't sound very inviting for you. You struggle with it. I struggled with it, and so you look for other, or at least I did. I searched for other thoughts,
Right.
philosophies, or beliefs that were a little bit more accepting of the behaviors that I was doing, rather than conforming to behavior that was positive in society.
Sure.
I looked for things that were actually accepting of my negative behavior, my negative thought process.
Sure. Of course.
And I think what I've always appreciated of Buddhism was it was very accepting of my negative behavior, because as long as I start tweaking it a little bit,
Yeah.
it wasn't telling me that I was going to go to some very horrible, horrific place in the afterlife. And I
Yeah.
think that was the initial
Same here.
draw
Same
to
here.
accepting the conversation, I should say, to accepting the conversation. Um,
Yeah.
but with everything, I think that if you're a person that was raised within a certain belief system, and you've gone out and hurt yourself in some other way, like drugs or alcohol or some other thing like that, I think a lot of times you've left that void in you. And so going back to at least that initial belief system and processing through why you stepped away in the first place, I think that's real important to your own personal healing.
Sure.
And I would encourage everybody to at least go back to the initial thought process or belief system, because from 0 to 5, that was a very, very important period of your life.
Yeah.
And if that's ingrained in you, you have this thing inside you, this God-fearing thing inside you that you better process through. If not, there's always going to be some sort of vacant hole that allows you to either be aggressive or angry towards those that have that belief system, or just very, I would say, just not respectful to
Right.
those that have that belief system. Because you stepped away,
Sure.
you think you've evolved, and they're not evolved. And you become very judgmental towards
Been
them.
there, done that too. And as far as the philosophy of Buddhism, those were some of the very same things that drew me to it as well. Like I love the fact that the onus was on me. Like
Right.
if I wasn't happy, or if I was suffering, it's because of me, not because of anybody else. And then yes, it was very accepting, and I don't mean tolerating. I mean accepting. There's a difference,
Right.
I think, between tolerate and accept.
Yeah.
And I felt very accepted by it, which I thought was really cool.
Right.
Another myth here. Now these are random. Once again,
Okay.
everybody. I don't have them in any particular order. I just kind of was jotting some things down. I actually did a little bit of work before the show, believe it or not.
Sure you did.
Yeah. Another one here is people. All right. So enlightenment is kind of a thing within Buddhism, right?
Right.
Enlightenment, using more specific Buddhism terminology, we refer to it as nirvana, right? So people often get this misconception that enlightenment or nirvana is like our version of heaven, right? Like
Yes.
they confuse it in either one or two ways, right? They think of either A, it's our version of heaven, or B, that means your life is perfect and awesome and you're totally cool all the time. And both of those are completely wrong, right?
Right.
All nirvana or enlightenment means is like, I'm going to date myself here apparently, which sucks that this is dating myself, mind you. I hated the moment that this happened. I was actually in a group one time and I was talking to people and I brought this up and they were like, "What's that?" And it blew my head.
What, the Love Boat?
No, Matrix. If
Oh.
anybody looked into the Matrix and saw it,
See, I just dated me.
yeah, the playing boss. So there was a moment though where Neo, the main character, sees the Matrix finally, and it like boom, and it hits, and he understands. He sees all the code. All enlightenment means is you've reached that point in life where you see suffering. You see the suffering that you create for yourself. You see
Right.
the suffering you create for others. You see the suffering that they create for themselves. Like it just boom, you see it. And that what that means then is negative, quote unquote, negative things still happen in your life. Things that don't fit with what your expectations are still happen every day.
Right.
But you are able to relate to them in a much more skillful way to where it no longer causes you suffering. That is enlightenment.
Well,
So,
I'm there, Trinity.
well, there you
I'm
go.
a,
There you go.
but just take me. Just go ahead and put that under my name.
There you go.
Louis Alvarado Enlightened.
Real quick, dude, I'm gonna butcher this name. Jayla Vaught says, "Thank you
I
for
like
your
the name.
vulnerability. Tough topic. Beliefs need to be respected, not judged. Acceptance comes from a place of love." I agree 100%.
Amen. Amen to that.
And then, Simon, both of those myths I actually have on my list, brother. But so just to
Wait,
finish up
wait.
on,
Okay, go ahead. Finish that up, and then I want to say something before we get to the Dalai Lama.
yeah, so to finish up on this idea that nirvana or whatever, I get that from people who don't practice Buddhism. They think it's like our version of heaven, which is the exact opposite, right? Because heaven is this idea that you get everything that you want and it's all great and perfect, and that's not what enlightenment means. And then people who are new to Buddhism, they do think they buy into this idea that once I reach enlightenment, my life is perfect and all my problems are gone.
Right.
And so they're often disappointed when I correct them and say, no, that's not what that means, right? Even the Buddha himself, who reached enlightenment later on in his years, his back still hurt. I mean, he died of food poisoning, for God's sakes. Like, he still experienced all these things. The only difference is he was able to see them for what they were and not suffer from them. That is what enlightenment nirvana means. Would you have, you said you need to say something?
Yeah. What I wanted to say was I don't like, and I don't know if this is necessarily a myth, but you can corral it back into the topic however you wish. But I struggle with any belief system trying to own words because like when you read that, like I said, amen, and so
Right.
it triggered something in my head. I say amen. I use the word a lot, and that's me like saying I like what you had to say, right?
Sure.
I like saying prayer. I like saying the word prayer. Yet I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Catholic anymore, and so uh, just like you do it too. You tend to get a little frustrated when people use the word karma or
Right.
like you say incorrectly or what is the one that the therapists like to use a lot nowadays? Uh, oh my God, you know which one it is, man. The therapists say it all the time, and you told
Oh,
me that's
mindfulness.
Buddhist mindfulness.
Yeah.
So what I don't like, and it's my pet peeve. I don't think any belief system should own words.
Right.
I don't like Christianity owning the word prayer because when I say it, I mean it the way I want to mean it.
Right.
And when I say the word amen, I mean it the way I want to mean it. But I'm also like that with words that you might be protective of, mindfulness or and not that we disagree,
Sure.
but mindfulness or karma.
Right.
If I choose to use that word, it doesn't mean that I'm uh, uh, attacking or disrespecting that religion
Sure.
and I don't believe that religion owns it. So even if I say the word heaven or God, there's a big one. The way
That's a
when
big
I
one.
say the word God, it doesn't mean that you or any other belief system should own the word God when I say
Yeah.
it. And so is that something that I can throw in the hat as a myth that any faith owns
Yeah. I mean, well,
words?
it's a myth that like meditation means Buddhism. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's a tool that we
Namaste.
use, but it's not. You know, like many people meditate. You don't have to be Buddhist to meditate, and you don't have to meditate if you're Buddhist. Like you know, it's just it's a tool, but you don't have to. I do have a word like that I've used, and people look at me cross-eyed when they know that I'm not only Buddhist but atheist. I'll say blessed.
Yeah.
I'm blessed. I feel
That's
very
another one. I say
blessed.
blessed a lot.
And like, people look at me like, "Well, you're not really." I was like, "You don't have to be religious to feel blessed." Like so. Yes, I agree.
Well, I actually happen to love all religions
Right.
for different purposes and for my own reasons. So I like to use a lot of the words of all the religions because I think each there's words within them
Right.
that I think are very powerful and good
Sure.
feeling attached to some of them.
Sure. So let me see here. Well, I guess I'll address the ones that Simon threw out because they're on my list too. But he already put them out there, so might as well. The first one
Right.
he put on here is the Dalai Lama is a figure like the Pope. Yeah, that is a myth, right? Like the Dalai
Now, what it
Lama. The Dalai Lama is. Let me see. His importance is increased if you are a Tibetan Buddhist. If you're not a Tibetan Buddhist, then his importance is lessened to you in a sense like the Pope really only means something if you're Catholic, right? If you're a regular like Methodist, you might not really care what the Pope has to say. You might respect
you should.
you might respect his place or his authority, but you don't necessarily it doesn't speak to you in the same way Catholics
Right.
would. So, for instance, with the Dalai Lama, he is big into Tibetan Buddhism. So if you're not a Tibetan Buddhist, then his words don't necessarily impact you in the same way. Having said that, for me personally, I respect the Dalai Lama, not only his position as the one of the figureheads in Tibetan Buddhism, but just as a person in general. Anytime I've ever heard him speak, it's typically a wise statement and impactful. It comes from a place of compassion. It comes from a place of wisdom. I've read some of his books. I do believe he is somebody to be admired. But that's not because I'm a Buddhist. It's because I'm a human being that I see the value in what he does.
Does he represent Buddhism?
He represents Tibetan Buddhism very well.
So he doesn't represent all Buddhism.
No, not he can. He doesn't have to. I mean, he goes off the
No, does.
four. I'm sorry.
I mean, is he the top dog in Buddhism?
To the non-Buddhist, absolutely. To the Buddhist, no. He's just another person who is saying great things. I mean, there's been many monks in history who've written great books, who've been very public out there as well, and they're just as important as the Dalai Lama does.
What are their names?
Oh, there's Tai Nichtan. There's I don't know. There's a bunch of them. I mean,
Never heard of it.
oh, you've heard of him. I guarantee you.
I've heard of James Patterson.
I'm butchering his name. I assure you. But he's written many books. He's very well known.
No, I guess my point is that I see what you're saying, that it's not the same as the Pope, but the Pope is the top dog in Catholicism, right? So
Yeah.
like Catholicism is kind of guide, and that's Roman Catholic. By the way, very much like you said, you could just say no, that's for Roman Catholics.
Right.
But in reality, whether we can say that's just Roman Catholics or they're more concerned about what he has to say than regular Catholics or whatever, it's still the Pope is the top dog in Catholicism, and so I think there's a top dog pretty much in all
Well,
faiths.
I guess
But you're not calling Buddhism a faith or a religion. So is he the top dog in that philosophy?
I guess what I would say to that is the way I personally, and I don't speak for all Buddhists, obviously, the way I personally see it is it's very similar to like there's a hierarchy in the Catholic Church where you have
Right,
the Buddhists and bishops and cardinals and everything else.
right.
There's no real hierarchy in Buddhism. We're all equal. We all have a Buddha nature. And so unless you've reached enlightenment, we're all the same. We're all equal. And once you've reached enlightenment, the only real difference is you become a Buddha. Then we all can become Buddha. We all can't become Pope. The Buddha is just all Buddha means is you've reached enlightenment. That's it. And once you've reached enlightenment, essentially, in theory, you have two different choices at that point. You can then
So
go
how?
on. Go ahead.
No, I was. Well, then how did he become the Dalai Lama?
In the Tibetan tradition, they have like their leader, if you will, in the Tibetan tradition. But
Okay.
that's like the difference between like Methodist, Southern Baptist. You know, there's so many different like sects of it.
All right. But the Dalai Lama, that's not his name. That's a title.
Yeah, that's a title.
All right. So that title is given to him. Why?
That one I couldn't. I mean, I haven't researched Tibetan Buddhism that much.
Oh,
I can speculate, but I don't definitively know. Yeah, there you go. Simon just put the name of the monk, Thich Nhat Hanh.
I have seen that.
Yeah, everybody's heard of it. He's a very, very famous monk.
Right.
But he's no more important than the Dalai Lama. Like, he is just another person in this philosophy who has reached a level where their words are impactful to those around them. And they've done that through the way they've lived and through the way they've practiced the philosophy.
So going by what you're saying, and I'm not trying to be flippant about
No,
this,
go
but
ahead.
by what you're saying, then on this show we should be able to get the Dalai Lama on this show, or Thich Nhat Hanh we should be able to get on this show because we're no less important than him, so he would do this show.
Maybe. If
But
you,
unless it's a hierarchy, and if there's a hierarchy of importance, we would have to go to a secretary, or we would have to go to his handlers, and then we would have to ask for permission, then we would have to submit, documentation and submit all kinds of stuff. Because I can get a cardinal on the show,
right.
not the Pope. I can't get the Pope
I
on.
think that I'm not. We could potentially get the Dalai Lama on the show. If we didn't, it wouldn't be because of a hierarchy in the philosophy itself. It would be a logistical thing. It would be he only has but so many hours in the day, and if his choices are to go sit with the president or us, he's probably going to choose the president because that's a bigger platform for him to get his particular message or whatever. Much like I couldn't get the CEO of Apple on this show tomorrow. Like, is there anything preventing him from doing it? No. Would he do it? He would have to decide if it's worth it for him. If there's value in it for him, then he would do it. If there wasn't, he wouldn't. Much in the same way as the Dalai Lama. If the Dalai Lama did the show or didn't do the show, it would be more based on the value that he saw in it or the time available as opposed to any hierarchy in place.
I would like to think that sounds great. Sounds great in theory.
Sure.
I just think in practicality, I would like to see because what you're saying, there's no level of Buddhist, but I would like to get I would like to challenge that and
Sure.
get the name of the top 10 famous Buddhists and see if we can get them on the show. And if we can't, then that's really speaking more to, there is a level of hierarchy. It's an unwritten
Not
rule.
necessarily. Like, I don't want to. I don't want to confuse hierarchy with just they don't want to do it. Like there's no hierarchy in my life, but I'm not going to go do every podcast that calls me up and says they want me on there. Much in the same way, you and I both have so many people that reach out to us wanting to be on our shows, and we don't take everybody that does. That's not because there's a hierarchy, but because we have to evaluate from a business stance who's right for the show, who isn't right for the show, who's going to bring value, how we can spin it, and if you don't fit within what we're trying to do, then you're not going to be on the show.
I
So
could guarantee you that if the President of the United States or Dalai Lama or the Pope called us right now and says, I want to be on your next show. Matter of fact, I want you to cancel your
I
next
would
4 shows and I
absolutely
want
do
to be on
that.
them. We would do it. So,
But we
so there
wouldn't do
is a
that because
level
of
hierarchy,
we wouldn't do
but
that because of an inherent hierarchy. We would do that because the exposure and the fame and the watchers and viewers we would get from it.
I don't know about that part. I don't know about that part of it.
Yes, they would, because if Courtney Love called us tomorrow, she holds no space in society at the moment, but we would still have her on the show.
She's entertaining as hell. Of course, I would
Well,
put her on the
but
show.
that's that
But
once again,
but
it's a personal need of value that we see in it. That's not a hierarchy. That's just, do we see value or not? If you see value,
she
you do
but
it.
but she's on a level of hierarchy as well. She's got a fame hierarchy level. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to
Sure.
argue with him. I'm saying that there is a. I think that it sounds great the way you said it. Like the Dalai Lama is no more important than you.
He's not.
Uh,
I
I,
guarantee he's even said that. I guarantee you.
he could say whatever he wants to say, but as far as how he lives or how people treat him, I guarantee you people treat him a lot differently than they treat you. So
Sure.
I just don't buy it. I think that's maybe one of the myths about Buddhism is that's true. Maybe the real truth is that no, there is a level of hierarchy because humans are flawed, and because humans are flawed, they place a level of importance on different people just
Yeah, but
because of who they are,
that's a
or how
personal thing.
famous they are, of what they've written. Yeah, but
That's not a
it's a
structural thing. The Pope is structured. That is, he is the
I,
top dog.
yeah,
But
but maybe
we
because we're being
decide,
honest about it.
but we
Maybe
decide individually if we put any value on the Dalai Lama or not. Because there's many people out there who don't give a rat's ass about the Dalai Lama at all. They don't care. Period.
I bet
Buddhist
you
or
every
not.
Buddhist does. Or I bet you every Buddhist
I would
does.
I would I would I would lend my
Well,
belief to
then
think
I'd like to
Buddhists care about
find that. But
everybody, whether
I think
they're
we need to have. I think then we need to have a real top notch or whatever Buddhist on the show that would actually say, "I really don't give a flip about the Dalai Lama." I would love to see that because
I don't think
that
you
would.
would,
I don't
because
think you would.
by nature, if you're a Buddhist, you care about everybody.
Amen.
So, I mean, if somebody were to come out and say that they don't care about the Dalai Lama or anybody for that matter, I would question their skillfulness in that arena of being a Buddhism. That's something they might want to look into.
Because I respect rabbis for being rabbis,
Yeah,
whatever.
same here.
I don't know who the top rabbi is. I don't know what to call a top rabbi.
No clue.
I don't know what to call I would respect an imam, but I don't know what the top imam is.
Right,
There's a lot of faiths and belief systems that I just don't know who the top dog
right.
is. But in the two that you mentioned, they're very famous top dogs. Dalai Lama is a very famous top dog, and so is the Pope is a very famous top dog. And those two things are not even their names.
But the only
They're
reason why
actual
they're
positions.
the reason why some of them are famous is because they decided to get teachers, and they have the charisma that Tick.
Like, who's the Hindu top dog?
I don't know.
Hindu is the largest religion in the world. Who's the
Well, some
Hindu
argue
top
that
dog?
it's not a religion actually, but yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh. He's just a monk. That's all he is. But he has charisma, and people want to hear what he has to say. He's written books. He's gotten book deals. Somebody along the line that said, "Hey, I'm going to pay you money to write a book," and then people read his book and became famous. Doesn't mean he's any more or less important. It just means he got a book deal, and that by default in our society makes you important. If the Dalai
But
Lama wasn't on TV, I don't think he'd be as important to many people either. But we know who he is because he's been on TV. If you were to get on TV a lot more tomorrow than you currently are, if you were on a national scale, your level of importance would rise. Doesn't mean it's structurally that way. It just means as a society, we place our value oftentimes on those who we see. Like if you're on TV, then obviously you're important, so I should think you're important too. I don't personally
it's
agree
not
with
just
that.
important. He actually holds a title name that is very specific to that belief system.
Tibetan Buddhism.
Well, but it doesn't say Tibetan Buddhism when you see the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, it
You
is.
see
And when you look up
Buddhism.
who he is, he's a Tibetan Buddhism. That he's from
I mean,
Tibet.
but what I'm saying in the whole world of people, just regular everyday people, and you would say who's the top of this, who's the top of this,
That's
who's the
you
top of this, who's
can't
the
base,
top of this.
but you can't base
So
a
I like
hierarchy on ignorance. I mean, just because they're ignorance on his actual history doesn't mean that he is the hierarchy.
all I'm saying is that we don't say Roman Catholicism. When people say the Pope is the head of Roman
Right.
Catholics. You know what I mean? In other words, I don't know, and that's why I like this as a myth. It's a really good myth to tackle because it made me think, well, who's the top of all those other belief systems?
Well,
I
just
can't even say I know all the tops. You know what I mean?
right.
It's not as simple as governors or presidents
Right.
or leaders of a country,
Sure.
except two. I could think of two major: Dalai Lama, Pope.
Right. Yeah.
It's weird.
I mean,
It's just weird. All of a sudden, it just triggered.
I don't. Other than human unskillfulness, I've never seen or read anything that would signify that anybody in the Buddhist philosophy or they themselves consider themselves any more important than anybody.
Mm.
Everything I've heard is from people who are not within the philosophy, who
Right.
once again are trying to label things and kind of quote unquote figure it out. But I personally have never come across any literature, anybody within those philosophies, or heard them
Right.
themselves say anything other than we're all the same. Even the Buddha himself said that I'm not any more important than anybody else.
Right. Right.
So,
No, I heard what he said. I mean, I remember. Look, Siddhartha. That was my favorite book. I've recommended it to I don't
sure.
know how many people because I love what the book said.
Yeah, that's a good book.
Know, what I'm saying though is when you go beyond that and you watch it, like if I go into a restaurant and I see some statues and then I see like little food there for the statue, like they put food there for the like what is that about? Like is it
That's in the Mayana tradition. They have their own kind of ways. There's a lot of rituals within that particular sect.
is that Buddhism?
Yeah,
A type of Buddhism, right?
yeah,
So there's a lot of those types of Buddhism that does have little
yeah.
idols and they use idols and they use all these little rituals that they do with it. So I think when you segment it out and say, well, that's this type or that type or that type, but for the normal everyday individual, that's all Buddhism. You know
Simon,
what I'm
we're not
saying?
ready for that talk yet, brother.
What did he
He
say?
said, from the perception of no self, we're all basically the same. We're not ready for the no self talk, man. That one is I could dedicate like probably 2 or 3 shows on that one. The lack of self is probably the single hardest thing for anybody to wrap their head around in this philosophy. So, but Simon, you're 100% correct. But we can't get into that one on this show.
How many types of Buddhism are there?
I'm sorry,
How many types of Buddhism are there?
dozens, if not more. I mean, I'm not going to claim to know all of them, but I can think of at least 8 or 9 right off the top of my head. It's much in the same way of Christianity, how you have like some major ones, and then from that they break off to like I said, Methodists and Southern Baptists, and just and they're all under the same Abrahamic tree, if you will. But anyways, so going on to some more myths real quick, so I can get through at least a couple more before we run out of time. One of them says, and I covered this a little bit a couple weeks ago, where they think that you have to be like passionless, like you're not allowed to have desires or passion or even a spouse for that matter.
Right.
They think you have to be celibate, and those are all just not true. You don't have to be celibate. You are allowed to have passion. You are allowed to have desires. You're not a robot who's emotionless and detached and just doesn't care about anything. That's just not the case. The main difference being is you don't have to attach yourself to any given outcome. You work towards them, but your happiness isn't dependent upon that. As far as the spousal thing, yeah, basically the Buddha himself came out and said, look, man, sex is hard. It's difficult to remain skillful in that arena. So you don't have to do it, so just don't do it. And
Huh?
yeah.
Wait, now time out. What'd you just say? Did you just say sex is hard and you do not have to be skillful?
Staying skillful in that arena is hard. Not the act of sex, but the act of not being attached and not craving certain things when it comes to the sexual arena. What I mean by and philosophically, right? What I mean is if from a man's perspective, right? Because we're 2 men here. One of
Yeah.
the hot buttons for many men is the size of your genitalia, right? And so if a
Okay.
person at Walmart walks up to you and tells you got a little one, you're not going to give a shit. But if you were with a woman and the next day she tells you it was little, it's going to be more coming from that woman. It's going to hurt or sting more from that woman that you just slept with than it is a random stranger. And that's what I mean by inherently when you lay with another human being, there's certain cravings and things of that nature that take place. And I don't mean the carnal cravings of I want to do it again. No, I mean they're able to make you suffer more, or you're more attached to certain things and outcomes than you are to the layman. That doesn't mean that you want to marry everybody you have sex with. One night stands do exist. I get it. However, there's a certain emotional component there that doesn't exist with anything else. And that is the single hardest component to deal with skillfully. The Buddha himself said, if there was anything else out there as difficult to deal with skillfully as sex is, he himself wouldn't reach enlightenment, nor would anybody else.
Well, I think you should still want to be skillful at that, my friend.
Well,
And
basically,
and
this is the way.
I don't think you could turn around. I don't think you can lack all skill in that, and then turn around and look at the person and says, You should manage your expectations better
Yeah.
and just walk
So
away.
this is the way
You'll
I would
never get
teach
a
it.
second phone call from that person.
When I would do on my on groups and things of that nature, the way I personally would approach this is, if you're trying to achieve a total cessation of suffering in your life, I mean, how you reached enlightenment, there's no suffering whatsoever completely, then you probably shouldn't get into relationships with people because there's going to be suffering in there because there's going to be expectations that aren't met. There's going to be disappointments. It's going to happen. We're not that skillful. Having said that, if you're going to choose to get into a relationship and choose to participate in sexual relationships with people, which you don't have to do, I mean, you can physically live without those things. So if
Yeah.
you're willingly going into that, just understand that there's going to be those moments of hurt. There's going to be those moments of disappointment. There's going to be those moments of let down expectations, and you're going to have to work through them. It's kind of like a credit card. You can't go out and buy, take a credit card and buy a whole bunch of stuff and then get disappointed when the bill comes. You knew what you were getting into. So my advice to everybody else is yes, sexual relationships, intimate relationships are going to be the hardest, most demanding thing that you're going to participate in that you don't have to. So if you're going to, then understand that comes with certain consequences, and those consequences are going to be potential hurt feelings, let down expectations, and all those things I just mentioned. And so that's essentially what he said. So he was basically saying, like, look, it's an either or. Either you're going to have a complete lack of suffering in your life and be celibate, or you're going to have a little bit of suffering in your life, but you're going to have a relationship. Pick one.
Have you ever gotten in a fight with Angel and said
No, never.
life
We've
is
never fought
suffering?
before in our
No,
lives.
just that's your answer. Life is suffering. And then
She
walk
would
away.
probably throw something at me. Although I have told her many times, and it has made the argument worse, when she says something to me, I says, well, it looks like you need to address your expectations a little bit.
You said that to me.
Yes. And I'm
Yeah,
just being honest, man. That's who I
yeah,
am.
that I've heard. That I've heard. But I'm just wondering. Next fight you have with Angel, I want you to look at her and just go, "Life is suffering, babe," and walk away.
Yeah. As long as you have a couch or something I can crash on for a little bit, we're good.
I'm still stuck on that part where you just says he says that the sexual thing is bad and suffering or whatever the hell you just said. I was just like, what?
Yeah.
You had me at that.
Yeah.
You need to develop your
So
skill set, sir.
I have some more on here, but I'm gonna have to narrow it down to just one more because we're running out of time. And Simon did mention it earlier, and this is a big one I hear a lot. So I'm going to make. I have like probably at least 8 more here, but the one that I
Cool.
think that needs to be addressed is reincarnation, rebirth, if you want to call it.
Right.
That one I hear a lot, man. And
It's a
and
Hindu belief system, I believe.
yeah, it did originate with them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
this is where I try to help people understand a little bit.
Right.
There, the translation from the Pali Canon is a little bit different, right? And so there's not necessarily words to get crossed the same intention in that language. And
Right.
so the way I choose to explain it to people is when it comes to rebirth and reincarnation, if you will, we typically think I'm going to die and come back as something.
Right.
Instead, what I try to get people to understand is everybody who's watching this, including you and me, the person, the entity that started watching this is different
Right.
than who you are right now. Like
Yes.
who you were 30 minutes ago, an hour ago, that person's gone. It doesn't exist
Yeah.
anymore. Who you are now. So in theory, every second you are reborn. Every second is a
Yes.
rebirth. And that to me is what reincarnation and rebirth was intended to be. Meaning every second I can choose to be different. Every second I'm born again and I have new choices. I don't have to be what I was 30 seconds ago, nor am I what I was 30 seconds
Right.
ago.
Now matters more.
Exactly. So in that sense, every new second is a new you. And so you are reborn or you have reincarnation every second. So to me, that challenges this notion that I'm going to die and come back as a bird or come back as a whatever it is.
I'm
That's
not dying, Trinity.
yeah, that's not what was meant with the reincarnation or the rebirth.
Right.
And that's the only one that I can think of, depending on your definition or how you interpret it, that could in fact
Right.
go against certain religious beliefs. Other words, if you're a Christian, you believe when you die you go to heaven. This idea of reincarnation, it
Or
doesn't
hell.
match up, or hell. So, but the idea that you're reborn every second,
Right.
even a Christian can get behind that one because
Right.
it's
Right. Right.
scientifically it's kind of true, right? So, man, we still have some more good myths, but we got to cut it now
Why?
because
Why do we got to cut it?
I guess we don't really. I mean, we have a couple more. I guess we don't have to. You and I make the rules, so we can just decree that moving forward.
You just did. Did you
I
just do
did.
the sign of the cross?
I did.
I
So I guess
like that, Marissa.
the other one I
Every
have here is
now, shoot straight.
just to keep them going. I guess new momentary opportunity for input, review time, and choice of action. Very good. All right. So the other one I have here is meditation, right? And so and you wanted to do a whole show on it at one point, so I won't go too in depth at the moment, but the misconceptions around meditation are a few, right? Number one is that you're either good at it or you're not good at it. That it is the
I,
only tool or the major tool of doing things, or as a Buddhist you kind of have to, or if you do it you are a Buddhist. Those are all kind of misconceptions, right? There's many Buddhists out there who don't meditate at all.
uh-huh.
There's many Buddhists out there that do meditate.
Right.
There's people out there who are not Buddhists that do meditate, and there's no such thing as being good or bad at it. You either do it or you don't.
Can we time out right there? Simon, do you meditate? Now I gotta wait.
I'm going to say Simon probably. And knowing Simon, he probably meditates for like 8 days at a time or something. Like he takes things to the nth degree.
Let's find out. Simon, do you meditate? And are there any other Buddhists on right now on Facebook Live?
That's a good question. So
And the reason I'm asking is because Trinity, every single person that we've ever come in contact with, the second they hear you're Buddhist, two things, right?
yeah,
Two things. One, they throw out some sort of little word,
yeah,
right? But two, they all bring out a type of what type of meditation do you do, and they'll say a specific meditation.
yeah.
Every time I'm with you, and as soon as they know you're Buddhist, they'll mention a specific type of meditation.
Or they'll ask me what type of Buddhism I
Or what type?
follow. And for transparency's sake, if you're watching this, I like them all, but I'm more closely aligned to Vipassana.
Well, Vipassana.
Mm-hmm. It's just self transformation through self observation. Basically, is really what that boils down to.
That sounds like me again.
Yeah.
You just described me.
Marissa said she's not Buddhist, but she meditates. Probably should more often.
Right.
And Simon said
She
yes.
also exercises her butt off. She's actually really.
Simon said yes.
Really well, right?
Yes, he meditates, differing lengths, and not just sitting. Sometimes standing or walking. Focuses on something when he's driving.
What?
Yeah, yeah. There's different types of meditation.
Focus on the road, Simon. Focus on the road.
I do personally. I do walking meditation or driving as well. I don't do much of the traditional sit down on the couch cushion or something like that. I don't really do that personally.
Hold on, nap.
Yeah. But meditation, people think that meditation is like, the creme de la creme, or that makes you. No, man, it's just a tool. Some people use it, some people don't, and there's many ways to use it.
Yeah, my meditation could either be called a prayer or meditation, the way I do it.
Right.
It's very similar to like what a prayer is, which is I just sit there and
Right.
focus on a specific thought.
All right, and then I have here, what else? I have enlightenment is happy all the time. I think I kind of already discussed that one.
Right.
People do believe that when we say that, they think that we're a very negative bunch because we say life is suffering, or life is pain. Technically, not life is suffering. Life is pain, because pain isn't optional, but suffering is. But when we say life is pain, they misinterpret that, and oftentimes they think that we're these negative, pessimistic group walking around, thinking, "Oh, life sucks." No, life is pain in the sense that there's pain happening all around us all day, every day, right? And pain is more of a spectrum. Pain is anything that happens that we don't agree with, period. And that could be, hey, I couldn't find my keys this morning, to, hey, my mother just died. Like, it's a spectrum, and anything that we don't agree with or we don't enjoy or whatever it may be, we find displeasurable, that's pain. And yes, life is pain. Every second of every day, something is taking place that you don't necessarily agree with. Doesn't mean you're hating life and moping around all day long. The suffering, on the other hand, is the internal stuff that we do to ourselves, how it impacts us. That is optional. The pain of life, it's not optional, man. It happens. And so that's what we mean by pain. Life is pain.
It's such a good pain, though. I really like it. Maybe I'm sick like that.
Yeah. Simon says, when I wake and lying in bed, just glad of breath, and then try to be realistic, grates with positivity and pessimism. True. And then impermanence. They think that we oftentimes are very negative because we think of impermanence, like nothing lasts. But there's what they don't realize is there's positivity in impermanence as well, right? When we think impermanence, nothing lasts forever, we tend to think of all the good stuff that we like in life, and we think that it sucks that goes away. But impermanence also applies to things that we don't like. So no matter what you don't like, it's not going to last forever. And everything is impermanent, both the things that we like and the things that we don't like. And even the things that we do like, there is suffering or there is pain in the things that we like. Because no matter what it is that you like, it inevitably stops. So no, we're not pessimistic. We're not walking around a bunch of Eeyores moping around. That we don't have to do that. Simon says.
Simon says.
A realistic view being like wholesome or right view. Correct. So I did clear pretty much all the ones. Some of them were a little bit duplicated, and then Simon helped us get through some of them. So I think we covered enough myths, if you will.
Right.
I don't know if we have to wrap things up like we normally do, because I think we kind of just got them all out there. No 3 tips for today, but I will say, as a wrap up, and Louis, do you have anything you want to wrap up with, or?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. Well, excuse me. Let me get you full on. No, it's all you.
I don't want to be full screen. I want to talk to you still.
Oh, okay. Let me put you back on then. All right.
Thank you. No, look, I want to know more about the birthplace of Buddhism, because if we're saying the Dalai Lama is a Tibetan Buddhist, right? Mm-hmm. And most people, when they think Buddhist, they either think of the Hollywood Buddhist, or they think about the little fat dude, right? Mm-hmm. If in 2020 I'm still allowed to say the little fat dude that's sitting there, the little statue. So those two are symbols of Buddhism in the world, I would think, right? Tibetan Buddhism and then the Chinese Buddhism. What is that Chinese one? What is that called? What kind of Buddhism is that?
Wrong. I don't know.
But they're not saying they're wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know.
They're selling it as the Buddha.
Let me see what Chinese Buddhism is called.
Right.
I haven't researched that one very well, so I don't know what the main one that they practice.
In both places, Tibet and the China little fat dude.
Mahayana is really what they go off of.
Yet China is not the birthplace of Buddhism.
No, Nepal is.
So how did that happen?
Well, I mean,
like, how did they grab it and own it? How did they take ownership of it?
I don't personally know of anybody that thinks that China owns Buddhism.
But if you ask the normal everyday lay person, you want to call them the ignorant, but I call them everyday society people. They tend to all think of those two things. Either Dalai Lama. If I say Buddhism, they think Richard Gere, Dalai Lama, or the little Chinese fat dude.
See, I don't know. Well, first of all, the fat dude's not Chinese. He's Mahayana.
No, he's not. He's not Chinese. But that's where you see it. You'll see it at Asian restaurants. You'll see it in stores that sell a lot of Asian stuff.
I wouldn't confuse commercialization with beliefs. Like, most people, when I hear
commercialization exists for a reason. Like the babushka doll is always in Russian stores. Any store that pretends to be Russian or is Russian will have the babushka doll, where you keep taking one out of the other until you get to the little tiny doll. That's a Russian thing. Yeah, any Mexican place has a sombrero, or they talk tacos. It's just
that's commercialization, though. That's not necessarily like people. When I talk to, most people don't even know. The people that I speak to, they don't know that Buddhism is prevalent in China. Most people I know, they think of Sri Lanka, Nepal, India. Those are the places that they think of.
Well, you must hang around a very elite, intelligent group of individuals, because I don't think the normal, everyday individual even knows where Sri Lanka and Nepal is.
I can't tell you. I didn't say they know where they're at. I just know that they associate.
I don't even think they even say those names. I think most people say simple words like China, India, United States, Russia. Maybe. They use words like that. That's the normal, everyday person.
Maybe. I mean, not the ones I personally come in contact with. So I can't speak for everybody. But it never, I don't know. I can't speak to that, I guess. But China does have, Buddhist population, but so does everywhere. They don't, to me, they don't own it. I mean, Tibet, I think, is probably what most people would think of, because Tibet
which even that is, when you travel to China, is how you get to Tibet.
It's bordering it, but
Marissa
just said, I thought India. So she didn't think China.
No, but I thought, where it's at, it's in India as well. That's not the point. What I'm saying is that little
but she Buddhist, not an Indian she didn't think China. She thought India. I don't know if anybody personally thinks China.
Answering to it, because we're talking and then it's delayed. But India, I think Hinduism more than anything. That's what I think in India.
I think yoga.
Even though they have everything.
Yeah, I think yoga.
Yeah, yoga.
That's what I think of when I think of India.
I think the snake, the cobra, and I think what do you call it? Hinduism.
Right.
Every country has like its thing that you think about, right? In China,
She says, I'm getting a cramp. I have to say it. China thinks they own everything. That's what she said.
yeah, well, it's because they don't research and develop anything; they just steal things, apparently.
Sure.
And I think they stole Buddhism because Tibet, they own it,
See,
they run it,
I
they
don't think they
control
stole
it.
Buddhism though. Like, I really don't.
Yeah,
I don't know of too
I
many
think
people
they
who
did.
think
I think
Buddhism
they.
in China are like
I think we need to put that out.
synonymously.
I think we need to put that out. What country? I think we need to put that as a question.
Sure.
What country, when you think Buddhism, what country do you think presents Buddhism more than any other country?
Sure.
Because that little fat dude, you don't see him in India at all. You don't see him in Indian stores. I go to a lot of Indian stores or restaurants. There's no Buddha. There's no little Chinese
Okay.
Buddha.
I'll put it out and see
And
what they
I
say.
call it a Chinese Buddha because it's the only stores that I see it. Any kind of Asian. Any kind of Asian. I'm not even going to say
Yeah,
just
but
Chinese.
you're associating that with America, man. Everything here is so commercialized. Like
Oh,
you no,
I'm not gonna blame the United States.
no, I'm just saying it's they throw everything together, man. Like stuff that doesn't even belong together, they put together just because it sells.
But I don't think we did it. I don't
He
think we're the
says
ones.
they mixed it with Taoism and created Zen. That's what Simon was saying. But anyways, no, the Buddha himself was in Nepal, and that's where the
Right.
moment he became Buddha was under the Bodhi tree in Nepal. And as a matter of fact, they actually still have the Bodhi tree there. Like
Right.
there's a place there you can go to, and they call it the birthplace of it.
Yeah. No, and that I understood because like I said, I read the book and
Yeah, that was the
and it was
moment where he
it was very meaningful to me.
touched the ground. Says, "I see you,
But
Mara."
it's almost like if all of a sudden some other place started claiming Catholicism. You know what I mean? Like if you say Mormon, right?
I
You
think Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. You say Catholic, you think Rome. Well, when you think Buddhism now, it's Tibet. And why? That's all I'm saying is why Tibet?
Well, because Dalai
The Dalai
Lama
Lama.
is the biggest figure that people see, and he's from Tibet.
Why not Hollywood? Richard Gere's bigger than the Dalai Lama.
I doubt that. And shoot, half of our population watching this is probably
I'm kidding,
Googling
I'm
Richard Gere
kidding.
right now.
I'm kidding.
And by the way, when I looked him up trying to get him on the show, he looks old now, man. I love him, man. He's a cool dude, but wow, he is definitely. I did not know he was that old.
My mom still loves him, so we
Yeah,
got to
my
reach
mom
him just
does
so I
too.
can tell him to say, "Hi, Martha."
Yeah.
If I could just get Richard Gere to say "Hi, Martha," it's almost like getting Jose Canseco to say it because
There
she
you
loves
go.
Jose Canseco too.
Well, on that note, let me go ahead
I'm done.
and finish the show here. I'll
Right
play
on.
the outro. Anything else you want to wrap up before we call it a day?
I love you, Trinity.
All right, love you too, man. He said, "Fat Buddha is Buddhai, believed to be the monk who introduced Buddhism to China."
There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah, but 100%. All right, so let me go ahead and pop on here. All right, guys. So today we covered a lot of myths and misconceptions when it comes to spirituality, religion, and more importantly, more specifically, I should say, Buddhism. I hope this kind of educated some of you guys, or at least tweaked your curiosity enough to look up more on your own. But more so, cautionary tale, right? Like before you start to judge things, before you start to assume that you know somebody else's spiritual makeup or what they should or shouldn't be doing, look into it a little bit more, or take everything with a grain of salt, essentially. Because there are plenty of myths and misconceptions out there. Think of how many times you personally have been misunderstood by somebody who thought that they knew all about you just by looking at you. Try not to make that same mistake. And I think that would be my my aha message for the day. So I think that's what we got. We'll stick around probably for a few minutes here afterwards and kind of talk a little bit and see what's up. So in the meantime, now that you know better, do better. Peace. Are you still here? What are you doing? I told you, go do better.